was one about Jews in the colonies that I wanted to mention.
Yes, the Plantation Act. That was the first ever act of official anything
Yes.
that fully enfranchised Jews, and it's described as having been passed in the parliament almost in secret so that the people wouldn't realize it was happening. I mean, they do that shit in the Congress now. Like, they
Right.
have all these real draconian laws that no one wants and are really unpopular, and they just pass them in the middle of the night, or
Yes.
they bury them. They bury them as an amendment in a 1,000-page monstrosity, like the big
Yes.
beautiful bill, where they have all this funding for Palantir in there and all this shit that like is really bad for the country, and they
Yeah.
just bury it in 1,000 pages that, frankly, no one in Congress is reading, no one in the street is reading, and no one in the media is talking about. It's
Yes.
true. And they fuck this. The English were the first to really pioneer this tactic.
Yeah.
Liberal democracy has always had this problem.
Yeah. This blew my mind because this is long before. It shows that Jews had influence and were naturalized. I mean, again, we get into all the 1791 naturalization people, that always like to bring that up. Well, actually, the Plantation Act was the precursor to the natural. It was the model for the Naturalization Act of 1791. I looked this up and I found it, and let me pull that up.
Yeah, so all these rightoids that are like, America was founded as a northwestern European country, as you can see from the 1790 Naturalization Act. And then you read the history that led up to it, which is that it's just a rewriting of the 1740 Plantation Act, which says that Jews, that basically anyone can be a U.S. citizen.
What they did was, it said an act for naturalizing such foreign Protestants and others therein mentioned,
Others
settled
therein
or should settle in His Majesty's colonies in America. So this was that any Protestant alien residing in the American colonies for 7 years without being absent from their colony for more than 2 months may be deemed His Majesty's natural born subject of this kingdom. Now, this did not apply to the British Isles.
Only the American colonies.
Only the colonies, right. And it said that the act was not intended for conscientious Roman Catholics, and they were referred to as papists. Exceptions, however, for non-conforming religious scruples and conscience were made in the case of Quakers and Jews.
Wow.
So now this is not a minor.
No Catholics, yes to Jews. Wow.
This is a big deal.
That's the Scott Greer ethos.
Yeah.
Scott Greer ethos. No Irish, no Italians. Yes to Jews.
And in England they couldn't pass this, and in fact this was a huge fight. And in fact, a lot of the good opponents of the Jews in England that are mentioned in the book were fighting to get this repealed in the colonies, and they were not successful, even when they were successful at blocking it in England. Yes. But what's interesting is the Plantation Act, during its 30-year utilization, would define British North America as a refuge and land of opportunity. The prohibition on naturalizing foreigners under the Act was considered intolerable and would be included in the grievances listed in the Declaration of Independence. Despite that being a British law, the Plantation Act, quote, was the model upon which the Naturalization Act of 1790, the first U.S. Naturalization Act, was based.
Funny, just that we were talking about that last week. So we were talking about it. Wow.
So the Declaration of Independence specifically complains about the 1740 Plantation Act, not that it included Jews. And again, in Parliament, that was the complaint. Like, the big controversy raging over the Plantation Act in England is that it shouldn't include Jews, that we're naturalizing Jews in the colonies.
Yes.
But the founding fathers, their complaint was that it is too restrictive, and that we need to naturalize.
And now you can totally see now why Haym Salomon would fund the Continental Army.
Right.
You can totally see it.
Right.
Like, it's not that they were necessarily, it was a personal grievance against England. It was just a business decision.
Right.
Like, the founding fathers want to put me in charge of the commerce of America. Right. That's what Haym Salomon would say. And I'm going to fund that.
there's a whole area of scholarship, like you said, Joe, like new wrinkles are opening up in your brain.
Yeah, right.
Starting with my big thing with what's his name, Colin Woodard's American
Yeah.
Nations. He was the first one. He quotes a paper that I have obtained talking about Barbados, and I've talked about on this show many times how the Barbados, particularly
Oh
Barbados, the
yeah,
island,
it's the
but
first one.
how that was the most profitable by far of all the
Yes.
New World colonies, and how it was a different model of slavery than the slavery of the Chesapeake colonies.
Recall. Yes. Go. Okay.
Yeah,
Finish. Finish.
yeah. Well, just that it was a cash crop model. That you
Well,
bring the blacks
recall.
in. Yeah,
Recall.
yeah. Go ahead.
Sugar. Right.
Yes,
Sugar.
yes,
Now, for us, sugar is a very unremarkable thing. But if you're living in the world of the 18th century, I remember I saw a movie recently from like the 50s, and the old people are putting sugar on bread. Like sweetening everything was such a novelty.
right.
And as we know, sugar, I don't want to get into health quack stuff, but sugar is as addictive as heroin. So Jews taking over, monopolizing the sugar trade of Jamaica and the Caribbean effectively was like being an international cocaine trafficker or something
Yes, yes,
because of how addictive sugar is. Sugar and rum, they monopolize those things. And so they have the 18th century equivalent of heroin and cocaine completely monopolized in their hands, and they're trafficking it all over the world.
yes.
And that brings an enormous amount of money to you
Yes.
and your
Yes.
community.
So what my theory is, connecting the dots here, because the point that Woodard makes, and this was made by others that he was quoting, is that the model of slavery in Barbados was so different from the model of slavery in the Chesapeake and the Tidewater colonies, which were where Jefferson and all those guys are from. That model was, you have the Cavalier landed aristocracy, and you have a couple of slaves to help out with like farm equipment. The Barbados model was this ultra capitalist model of huge numbers of blacks. Now, the interesting thing is what Peter Aldag, and this is where I'm just connecting the dots. We always hear about the Jewish role in slavery. The Jews first arrived in Barbados.
Yes.
And it says Barbados is probably the English possession where the Jews first appeared openly as early as 1628.
Wow.
Their ethnic brethren soon joined them, and the trade was largely in their hands. Um, so again, they got this little in, and this is before the 1740 Plantation Act, but already in the 1600s, Jews are in the
Yeah.
part of the American colonies where, like I've said before, the vast majority of blacks in this country came through the port of Charleston, which was settled by people who were these Barbados-style capitalists. So again, Jews are right there with the importation of all the blacks into America.
Right. And
And
recall how the first ever trade in Africa, in West Africa, happened, where a group of Jews, Dutch Jews, effectively, because these colonies constantly switched hands, Portuguese Jews and so on.
right,
But it was Portuguese, Dutch, English, but the common denominator was these Jews, and they brought rum, and so these
yeah,
black chieftains had never had, it was effectively Hennessy for them, like they'd never tried alcohol before,
right,
and
right,
so Jews would bring a couple of barrels of rum, and the African chieftains would trade enemy prisoners of war in their tribal wars. They would trade people for barrels of rum because they became alcoholics,
yes,
and that's how the slave trade began. It's a
yes,
fascinating story, and so the fact that the Jews controlled the rum trade, 100% of the rum trade was in their hands,
yes,
and that's the first instance of transatlantic African slavery. I mean, put two and two together there, right? Connecting
yeah,
the dots.
right. Right. So yeah, and then the other place where they started out was, of course, New York, back when it was still New Amsterdam, and then when it was New York in 1654. So it's funny how long they've been in New York. That's what's the extra irony of Mamdani.
Yeah.
Johnny, because right now, not only did he take the most primary votes, I think I mentioned this, he's polling to lead. He's leading right now
Gonna
in the poll.
win. He's gonna
He's
win
going to win.
unless they
He's going to
kill
win.
him
Yeah,
or Trump finds a way to deport him or something. He's gonna
right.
win.
Yeah. But they totally took over, and it's because, see, America for the Jews, and again, you have to understand, if you are someone who believes in the nationality of white people in North America, as opposed to the construct of the republic founded in, started with the Declaration of Independence, 1776. There was already white people in America for 250 years prior to the founding of the republic. We've been here for 500 years altogether. So all the roots of what would become the United States were already there in the early 1700s. And as we see here, as early as 1727, there were hardly any barriers to the naturalization of the Jews in the colonies. Um, and the oath laid down for this purpose, with the final word, "so upon the true faith of a Christian," had been declared unnecessary for Jews. So a
Yeah.
legal phrase was considered so insignificant that it was ignored in the New World from the earliest days, remained so important in the Old World that it was able to hold back the complete emancipation of the Jews in England until
Yeah.
1858. In North America, of course, the omission of this oath norm had the contrary effect on satisfying Jewish desires, so it is not surprising, given the Jewish mentality, that the Jews went on to illegally take part in the elections of 1737. So the point is that the Jews found North America because of the capitalistic mode of the
The
North
New
American,
World colonies.
the New World colonies, yeah,
Yeah.
and because of
And
the
the fact that people in England, Gentile leaders in England, as they talk about later with the intermixing, all
yes,
these English nobles were becoming insecure at the rise of capitalism and global merchant trade, because they're all landed people who live off rents,
yes,
and they see the rise of capitalism where people are making way more money than they have, and so they start getting insecure and they start reaching out to Jews for intermarriage, for business reasons, and so on. And because they've been there for 100 years, 200 years in Barbados and Jamaica and the
right,
Americas, they have no choice but to work through them,
right,
because they've already monopolized everything, all the cash crops, all the slaves, everything's in their hands.
yeah,
So if you're a British aristocrat, you have no choice but to deal with them.
right,
I mean, it's
right,
just,
yeah.
it's actually not hard to see how we got to this position.
No,
It's
it's
very,
really
very
hard. Again,
easy.
it's
Everyone is in debt. White people, we have a problem. Our race has a problem where we're always in debt, and we always want to do more than we actually want to live beyond our means. And guess who is there to give you the Faustian bargain?
yeah,
And then you become reliant on them. Then you depend on them. Okay,
yes,
and that's when the shit really
and that
gets bad.
yeah. Yeah, and Aldag concludes, all told, there is no doubt that the Jews had at least the same influence in the colonies as in the mother country, and it is therefore not surprising that it was from the New World, where the colonial societies were not as old and deep-rooted, that the first successful steps towards Jewish emancipation were taken. And I want to just emphasize for the audience, because Joe and I just read like 200 pages of just dealing with this thing leading up to 1858. The battles that led to that moment. I mean, it's way too much for us to cover here. But
Yeah, no,
how much the native English fought and resisted this simple, so that's why I say this simple thing of 1740,
little thing.
not a
Yeah, the
little
little
thing,
thing was a huge controversy
huge for
in the British in the British mainland,
yeah,
and it was specifically all the things that eventually happened. People
right,
were saying, if you let them control the New World colonies and the cash crops, they will eventually come back to the mother country and buy it up. That
yes,
was the complaint, and that's exactly what happened.
yes.
That's exactly what happened.
So
And
yeah,
all these naysayers and epistemic polluters, just as today they existed back then, they said, no, the Jews will eventually assimilate to British society. Oh, they'll become Christians, they'll intermarry, and so on and so on. And instead, what happened is the entire British nobility became mongrelized. And so now you have he goes through the list of contemporary English warmongers in World War II, and he goes through their lines, and all of them are descendants from like British nobles that intermarried with Jews. I had someone recently tell me, I don't know if this is true, that the Sassoon family behind the Opium Wars in China, that were basically heroin traffickers that the British Empire fought on behalf of, that they intermarried with the Churchill line. That's
Oh,
something I didn't
really?
know before.
That's
That's something
interesting.
I've heard.
That's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah. But yeah, it's something, he doesn't spend hardly any time at all in the book talking about the New World, but it's just significant for people to understand what these colonies were founded to be, why they existed, how they operated, how and why the Jews got here, and how the structure that came out of it, the United States, had all these flaws built into it, and there was not an attempt to create a nation state of an ethnic group here. It was separating from, it was uniting the colonies, separating them from the mother country, but in many cases more liberal towards Jews than England was at the
Yes.
time. I mean, there's no question about it.
It wasn't really until Queen Victoria, the
Yes.
Victorian era, that they really began to integrate Jews and mix with them.
Yeah, the late
Um,
1800s. That was the
yeah.
other big thing that was surprising to me about this book, is that I had assumed, because of Cromwell and everything, and my kind of rough understanding of it, that Jews, or that England was totally like Jewed since the time of Cromwell, and it's not true. They actually didn't really become totally captured by Jews and Judaism until like the 1860s onward.
Yeah.
And what I
Well, I no, that's
I
not
mean, I
true.
mean, they were really powerful
That's
before
not
that.
true. It was the mid 18th century when they passed the
Yeah,
Naturalization Act. They passed some sort of basically one really rich Jewish guy
yes,
got people that he paid in the parliament to pass a law just for him.
yes.
That
Rothschild.
basically, yeah, no,
Yeah.
no, 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 no.
Oh, you
Samson,
mean
Gideon
yeah, yeah,
Samson,
yeah. Yeah, Gideon
Gideon
Samson. Oh, yeah,
Samson in the
yeah,
1750s
right.
was the one that got the British
Started it.
Parliament.
Right.
Yes, and they passed a lot of this stuff, and then I think they tried to repeal it, and it was a controversy. But yeah, the city
Yeah.
of London, which is a special county that has the Bank of England and the stock exchange, this was the last holdout actually against the Jews,
Yeah.
and when that fell, that's when all the other dominoes toppled. That was
Right.
under Victoria.
I wanted to just mention this. This really struck me. The same Jewish tactic can be proven again and again in history. They work to achieve their goals through subtle and careful changes in legislation. First, they seek from the legislature the enactment of a law on what appears to be a matter of minor importance, the first stage for later efforts, and at the same time a test of the popular response to such a measure. If the response is not favorable, then the tactic is to wait a while and in the meantime use propaganda to prepare a better public mood for the next attempt at change. That thing of incremental change struck me with the two things in particular: the whole basis of the Civil Rights Act and what the Civil Rights Act was supposed to do, versus like now we see it come full circle where they're using it. The Justice Department is using it, Title VI, to say that anti-Zionist political views on college campuses are violations of the Civil Rights Act. So like we see where they plant, like why are Jews so concerned about defending the rights of poor black people to drink at the same water fountain as white people? And then incrementally, where it leads us 60 years later. The other one though is hate crimes.
Yes,
The
they had
idea of
that.
hate
Yeah,
crimes.
just so people can wrap their mind around it. People that think, oh, wokeness and the left, they had hate speech laws in Britain in the 18th and 19th century.
Yeah.
That people that criticized Jews were sent to the Tower in 1801.
Mm-hmm.
If you said something negative about Jews, you spent years in jail in the Tower for that alone.
Yes.
That's just so people would think, oh, wokeness. No, wokeness derives from the Jewish need to suppress criticism of Jews, because if it's allowed to fester, then the majority will just take their country back. That's
Right.
what wokeness is. Okay.
Right.
And sure, they can have different layers of cover over that wokeness, like a nesting doll, Russian nesting doll. So they just push the limits to trannies, so that when the popular blowback comes, it gets stuck like a bullet in a wall with the trannies. So people are celebrating. It's like, oh, look, we're able to keep the tranny out of the Olympics. That means we've beaten wokeness.
Right.
Meanwhile, like the government is literally putting people in gulags for criticizing Israel
Right.
right now. You know,
Right. Right. Yeah. Like here is one of these predictions. By the way, there's so many of these. I mean, he just goes through all of it. Um, this law talking about, I think this is one of the attempts when they were trying to do the Jew emancipation, and he really spends a lot of time documenting the debates over this in Parliament, and it's all recorded. But there's a prediction made here about the Jews controlling. Yeah, here it is. If the law were to be enacted, in time England would be entirely controlled by Jews. Their cunning and resources would soon undoubtedly carry them into Parliament. Even then, according to one letter writer, the Jews were not afraid to say the land of England would soon belong to them. Very similar to the Jewish slogan of today, it is your king, but our country. And then the same letter writer made this following startling prediction. The predictions in the Hebrew Journal, calculated for 100 years hence, may in a century or two be fulfilled, and our children that are yet unborn feel the direful effects of the pusillanimity and avaricious passion of their ancestors. They may see the Jews possessed of their principal offices under the government, or at least the principal officers of the state. And whenever that shall be the case, nothing but a miracle can save the Christian religion from utter destruction. Uh, it's amazing how many do. I mean, what did you think of how many times there were guys that predicted like what's exactly going to happen?
well, the thing is, like, it's not hard to predict it when it's happened before.
Right.
Okay? Because while this is happening, remember, after they passed the law to allow Jewish settlement in England, suddenly they started coming from all over
Yeah.
Portugal, Poland,
Oh yeah.
Portugal, and it's always that they've overstayed their welcome.
Yeah.
This is what it is. And
Yeah.
the complaints are the same every time. You let them in, they come with money, a lot of money, and they end up buying your media and your politicians and take over more money. They control your purse strings. And suddenly you're a stranger and an enemy in your own country.
Yes.
You're an enemy of the
Yes.
state in your own
Yeah.
country. It's just a pattern that repeats over and over and over. And I have to say, the Anglo-Saxon liberal system seems almost designed for Jews to rape.
Right.
It's like designed for that.
Yes.
It's all legalistic, plutocratic. You can buy a seat. You can buy an election. The nobility the queen gives knighthood to men whose only qualification for knighthood is that they're good at speculating on the stock market. Like, this is not what Europe is supposed to be. That's not what a European knight is. Okay? A European knight is someone, this is why they had to kill. Remember what I always said. They bought off and race mixed the British nobility out of existence. But they had to kill the French nobility. And the reason why they had to kill the French nobility was because Jews could not become French nobles, because it was an aristocracy of the sword.
Right.
You had to serve in war and you had to fight to
Right.
earn the title of knight in France. In England, all you had to do is do Queen Victoria a personal favor.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And that's all it required.
In a lot of ways, Queen Victoria, by the way, I mean, we'll get to it. We're not there yet. But in a lot of ways, I feel like Queen Victoria is worse than Cromwell as far as like being like philo-Semitic. Like, I feel like
it wasn't even philo-Semitic in any earnest way.
Right,
it was
right,
just
right.
Jews were useful in the short term.
Yeah. The British Empire. Well, we'll get to that. Let me just. So this is the other thing. You know, the stuff with Epstein. So again, we're talking about the 1700s here. Talking about warning about the Jews coming in for the danger of the nation. Here's a comment. We shall find that no people on earth are more apt to betray secrets and communicate private intelligence from one country to another than the Jews, on condition that they are well paid for it. They are a people who by their religion are rendered indifferent, blah, blah, blah. makes them careless which party they betray, so they can avail themselves thereby. Um, and this is all warning against the naturalization law, and it's astounding how many
All right.
how many
Hey,
times
hey,
they tried.
Warren, you got to ban this guy. This is the guy Fed posting in Rumble. We can't have that. No, I'm sorry. Nemo74.
Oh,
I'm sorry about your son or whatever happened, but you can't be talking like that.
yeah,
Yeah, no, sorry.
yeah,
And if you're bored, then fuck off.
yeah. If you're
Good.
bored,
Yeah, if
go
you're
watch
bored,
something else. You know,
go watch Sean Hannity. Go watch
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Don't be
watch.
I'm just going to say zero tolerance for anything to do with violence or instigating violence in our chat rooms. Just so you know, I don't care who you are.
Yeah, we can't have that. Not when we're talking about this stuff.
No.
Not when we're talking about this stuff. You know, like right now.
No.
Yeah, this was another line expressed in verse. Till her Britannian son prove honest, just, and true, and learn to hate that hateful thing, a Jew.
Yeah.
And talking about how they're worse than Hannibal. Yeah, awake
No.
therefore, my fellow
You know.
Britons, Christians, and Protestants. It is not Hannibal at your gates, but the Jews that are coming for the keys of your church door. Britons, awake! Let the noble spirit of truth and liberty fire the soul. So this is all in this debate over naturalization of the Jews. In this, we're talking about 1753, the mid 1700s.
Right.
It was all known what was going to happen.
Let's fast forward to we've done the Plantation Act, right?
Yeah, let me wait 1 second. There was one
Okay.
more thing on that I just want to make sure we didn't skip it. Yeah, we can move on.
Okay,
The Plantation Act stuff was really important. Oh yeah. The need to maintain the Plantation Act. Yeah, get this argument in favor of maintaining the plantation, because again, they were debating this constantly, like letting Jews in the colonies. The guy defending it. And it's amazing how many of the same arguments are used. Like we see,
Yeah.
for instance, the Ted
With
Cruz
Jews you
argument.
win.
Well,
With
they will
Jews
bless.
you win, or yeah.
Yeah. So it says, even with respect to the Jews, the discouraging of them to go and settle in our American colonies would be a great loss to, if not the ruin of, the trade in every one of them. For we know that the trade which gives life to the whole, a trade which I do not for very good reasons choose to name, is chiefly carried on by the Jews, by means of the correspondence they have with their brethren in other parts of America, without which no such trade could be carried on. So that's an example of the type of argument against excluding Jews from the colonies.
Right.
So yeah.
Let's go to page 306. This is about the attempt to naturalize Jews and the drama that came from it in the mid 1700s. Attempt to bring them into the fold that passed. The bill's proponents argued that the proposed law would only give Jews who were rich the opportunity. So go to that part.
Where is it here? Oh, yeah. Okay. Would only give Jews who were rich the opportunity to come to England and be naturalized, which would not be to anyone's disadvantage, but to everyone's advantage. Furthermore, it was not to be forgotten the Jews in England behaved well and contributed significantly to the payment of taxes. Additionally, it had been shown
that's the argument for immigration done now. I mean,
Yes.
They haven't even updated this fucking argument.
No. All the arguments are the same. There isn't one argument that we hear today that hasn't been deployed in like the 1700s on back to like the 1200s.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's what I was going to say. The Ted Cruz argument about the biblical argument. It will bless
that stuff. That stuff. All that says, like, that shit was like so badly done and so forced that no one fell for that. That was just some shit that was just some shit that shills read from a script even in the 1700s that everyone just laughed at.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, continue reading that paragraph if you can.
Additionally, it had been shown that, the Hebrews posed no threat to retail trade. Because, a lot of the businessmen were worried about the businessmen were not welcoming the Jews. They didn't want the Jews coming in.
Well, no, the argument, just to summarize the argument that they were making, was that Jews, by nature of not having productive laborers,
right,
cannot add to the economy. Think about that. That's anti-capitalist logic, actually.
Yeah.
In England, the argument against Jews, this is why I say, like, anti-capitalism is sublimated anti-Judaism. That's why Jews got in front of that.
Yes,
The argument they're making is
that's a good point.
the Jews don't manufacture goods. They don't build things. They don't grow food. They can't actually add to the economy.
Right.
All they can do is manipulate money that other people produce through labor. And so what happens is you end up getting secondhand English manufacturing that they'll buy or steal that then they go sell elsewhere.
Right.
And then they hide their income anyway.
Stealing.
That's
too,
the argument. They
part
don't
of
add to the system. They simply add a rent-seeking element to your system. So
Right.
while at first it produces money out of nothing, and politicians and monarchs like that, at the end of the day, it ends up becoming a burden on the productive forces on an economy, and you end up poorer. You end up in debt, and you end up at their whims. That's the argument. They said, like, if you're going to bring migrants to the country, at least have them be people who can work.
And you know
who can
what's
build
funny?